Hey, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Oh, pretty good.
Good. I'd like to sell this gold coin if I could.
Okay. 8 escudos.
I think it's still around, and he offered me $2,000 for it.
It's worth anywhere between nothing.
12 strangers walked into the same shop carrying 12 forgotten objects, never imagining what they were actually holding. A $200 gamble turned into a $10,000 payday. A coin that looked too perfect to be real turned out to be one of the finest ever struck. A guitar meant for a children's hospital fundraiser
I got the guitar because my boyfriend is building a children's hospital here in Las Vegas.
became a piece of music history worth $30,000. Every single item on this list carried a secret nobody expected, buried in rust, hidden in old family albums, or tucked away for decades without a second thought. Let's discuss these incredible finds, one by one, and find out exactly what each one was truly worth. Number 12. The Anglo-Saxon Spangenhelm. $10,000 for a piece of rusted metal. That's what one buyer walked away with after gambling on a $200 find at an estate sale. He wasn't a collector, he just liked a good deal, and he figured he could flip the item for a small profit. What he placed on the counter was an old iron helmet built from several plates riveted together.
I'm here at the pawn shop today to try and sell my iron helmet. It's really old looking.
The kind of headgear worn by warriors more than 1,000 years ago. Chumley admitted right away that ancient armor wasn't something he knew much about. Still, he could tell the piece felt different from anything sitting on the shop's shelves. Iron rarely survives this long. It rusts, breaks apart, and disappears within a few centuries, unless it's buried somewhere unusual, like a bog or a grave sealed off from air. So the shop called in metal expert Bob Dodge to settle the question. The seller had no idea any of this history existed when he first picked up the helmet. He simply liked the look of it, tucked it into his car, and figured it would sit on a shelf somewhere until he found a buyer. Dodge ran the helmet through an X-ray scanner that reads the exact materials inside metal. The results aligned almost perfectly with iron produced using methods over 1,000 years old. Traces of copper, zinc, and chromium pointed to a furnace process that couldn't fully melt the metal, leaving behind a signature that's nearly impossible to fake. The verdict landed at $15,000. The seller, still thinking in terms of a few hundred, raised his price instantly. After some back and forth, the two sides agreed on $10,000. A $200 gamble at a yard sale had just turned into a 5-figure payday, all because of a helmet that somehow survived nearly 15 centuries underground. What makes this find even rarer is how few examples of this style of armor exist outside museum collections. Most pieces from this period were either lost to battle, reshaped into new weapons, or simply rusted away in unmarked graves. Holding an intact example, let alone one that ends up at a pawn shop counter, is the kind of moment most appraisers only read about in textbooks. Number 11. The Eastern Mediterranean Dadrom. Rick almost turned the next item away for looking too good. A large ancient coin landed on the counter, and the seller hoped for around $20,000.
I have an ancient Roman coin that I think you'd be interested in.
One glance told Rick this could be something bigger, but something about it didn't sit right. He'd seen plenty of fakes walk through that same door, and this one looked dangerously close to perfect. Coins struck by hand thousands of years ago usually carry small flaws, slightly off-center designs, uneven edges, signs of a tool that wasn't perfectly precise. This coin had none of that. Every detail was sharp and clean, which in Rick's experience usually meant trouble. Fake ancient coins flood the market, and the good ones are convincing enough to fool an untrained eye. An expert was called in to settle it once and for all. After close inspection, he identified the coin as a Syracuse Decadrachm, struck more than 2,000 years ago.
Wow, a Syracuse Decadrachm. The decadrams of Syracuse are among the most sought after of all ancient coins,
and considered one of the finest examples of ancient coinage ever made. Counterfeits tend to look soft and blurred under close inspection. This one stayed crisp under every angle. The coin was real, and it carried a value of around $50,000. Rick opened with $35,000. The seller pushed back, and the two settled at $40,000. A coin that sat untouched in a family collection for decades had just become a payday nobody saw coming, proof that sometimes the most suspicious items turn out to be the most genuine. Coins like this one rarely survive in large numbers because rival nations often melted down enemy currency after a victory, erasing entire mints from history within a single generation. That makes every surviving piece a small miracle, a fragment of a city that disappeared from power long before anyone alive today was born. Number 10. The 1922 high-relief proof peace dollar. A coin won in a poker game doesn't usually carry historical weight, but this one did. Rick recognized it the moment it hit the counter. A rare proof coin from 1922.
Got a 1922 proof high-relief matte finish coin.
Okay.
That seldom made it past the design stage. The U.S. Mint tried something ambitious that year. A high-relief design, packed with detail, no machine of that time could handle well. The dies wore out fast, production stopped almost immediately, and most of what was made got melted down before anyone realized what they were destroying. For years, collectors didn't even know examples of this coin survived. Today, only about 10 are believed to exist anywhere in the world. The seller, holding a coin he'd won at a card table, thought $20,000 sounded fair. Rick brought in an expert to confirm what he already suspected. The coin checked out as genuine, and depending on the buyer, it could fetch anywhere between $50,000 and $100,000. The seller's expression said everything. Rick opened at $65,000. The seller countered with $90,000. After a few rounds of negotiation, they landed on $80,000, turning a lucky hand of cards into one of the largest paydays in the shop's history. Coin collectors spent years chasing rumors about this design before any confirmed examples surfaced publicly. Because the mint destroyed most of the early run almost as soon as it was struck, even seasoned dealers can go an entire career without ever holding one in their hands. Number 9. The Dutch East India Company Shipwreck Bell. A bronze bell doesn't usually carry the weight of a shipwreck behind it, but this one did.
This is my 1602 Shipwreck Dutch East India Company bell.
Or at least that's what the seller had been told years earlier. She'd bought it from a small shop overseas for just $700, with a story attached about a sunken trading vessel from one of history's most powerful companies. The old man wasn't convinced. After centuries at the bottom of the ocean, the bell should have shown far more wear. To settle the question, the shop called in a shipwreck specialist named Carl, who explained something most people don't consider. Many recovered artifacts only spend part of their existence underwater. Locals often pull these items out and keep them on land for years before they ever reach a collector. That explanation fit the bell perfectly. Carl confirmed it was authentic, placing its value at roughly $15,000. The seller, who'd paid only $700 for it, raised her asking price to $11,000. The old man fired back with a lowball offer, but Rick stepped in and offered $7,200. She accepted, turning a decorative piece gathering dust into a tenfold return, all thanks to a story that turned out to be true. Trading bells like this one once hung on the decks of massive cargo ships, used to mark time and signal danger long before radios existed. Losing one to the ocean floor meant losing a piece of a ship's identity, which is exactly why collectors pay such a premium when one resurfaces intact. Number 8. The George Washington Masonic Medal. No denomination, no obvious value, just a strange metal covered in symbols Rick didn't immediately recognize. This wasn't a coin at all. The markings pointed toward Freemasonry, the fraternal organization that counted several of America's founding fathers among its members. So Rick called in coin specialist David Vaghi to take a closer look. Vaghi had handled thousands of pieces over the years, but the moment he laid eyes on this one, his expression changed completely. Vaghi's reaction said it all. This wasn't just any Masonic medal. It was believed to be the very first one ever produced.
That is a George Washington Masonic medal. It is literally the first Masonic medal,
with only about 20 examples known to exist anywhere. An engraver who personally knew George Washington struck it in 1797, during the final stretch of Washington's presidency, making it a rare crossing point between early American politics and Masonic history. The seller had walked in hoping for $5,000. Vaghi placed its real value closer to $40,000. Rick opened at $20,000, but the seller wanted more, and neither side budged. After a tense standoff, the seller simply picked the medal back up and walked out the door, leaving everyone wondering whether that was a smart move or a costly mistake. Pieces tied this closely to a sitting president are almost never found outside major museum archives, which is part of why the negotiations stalled so quickly. Both sides knew exactly how rare the medal was, and neither one was willing to be the side that gave up too much ground. Number 7. The George Washington Funeral Medal. A small metal token sat in a man's collection for over 30 years, something he'd picked up at a coin show with his father as a kid. He figured it might be worth a couple $100 at most. Rick recognized it instantly as a funeral medal made shortly after George Washington died in 1799.
In December 1799, George Washington was about 2.5 years into his retirement, and by 10 o'clock that night, he was dead.
A moment that sent shockwaves far beyond American borders. Napoleon himself reportedly ordered 10 days of mourning across France, a sign of just how deeply the loss was felt outside the country's own borders. These medals were created so people could wear them as a visible sign of respect for the fallen president. The old man at the shop wasn't sure. The piece looked too clean for something over 2 centuries old, so an expert was brought in to verify it. The verdict came back positive. The medal was genuine, well-preserved, and worth close to $4,000. Negotiations started with a $2,000 offer against the seller's ask of $4,000. After some back and forth, they met in the middle at $2,500. A keepsake bought on a whim decades earlier had just turned into a small but meaningful piece of profit. Mourning tokens like this one were never meant to last this long. Most got lost, thrown away, or melted down once the wave of national grief faded, which makes a clean, surviving example a small window into how an entire country once grieved together. Number 6. World War I. M. Cole, knuckle knife. Family stories tend to grow bigger with every retelling. According to one seller, his great-grandfather had used the knife in his hands to kill thousands of enemies during the war. He didn't believe a word of it, but he hoped the old blade might still be worth something to help cover a few bills, even if the legend itself was nothing more than exaggeration passed down the family line. The knife stood out immediately because of its brass knuckle grip, built for both stabbing and striking in close combat. At first, it looked like something still being produced today, nothing rare enough to matter. Then a military weapons specialist named Alex Cranmer arrived and changed everything. He identified it as an M.H. Cole knuckle knife.
I'm here at the pawn shop today to sell my World War II era knuckle knife.
A highly sought-after fighting blade made during World War II by a police officer who couldn't serve overseas and instead built custom weapons for soldiers headed into battle. These knives were never mass-produced. and certain versions are nearly impossible to track down. This particular knife featured an early 9-point design, found only in Cole's first production run. The kind of detail collectors search for their entire lives without success. Cranmer valued it at around $10,000. The seller, expecting maybe $500, was floored. Rick offered $5,000, the seller pushed for $7,000, and Rick held firm. The deal closed at $5,000, turning a forgotten wartime weapon into a financial lifeline. Custom-made combat tools like this one rarely came with paperwork or documentation, so most surviving pieces depend entirely on small design details to prove where and when they were made. That single brass knuckle pattern ended up being worth thousands on its own. Number 5. 1907 ST. Gaudens' Double Eagle. Not many people walk away from a poker game with a gold coin in their pocket, but that's exactly how one seller ended up holding a coin many consider the most beautiful ever struck by the United States Mint. President Theodore Roosevelt personally pushed for this redesign, believing American currency lacked any real artistic value, and he brought in a famous sculptor to make it happen. The coin's history carries more than just beauty. Its original design left out the phrase referencing trust in God, sparking public anger that eventually forced Congress to order the motto restored. The seller hoped for $1,000, unaware that the gold content alone pushed the value higher than that. An expert graded the coin and uncovered another layer to the story.
8 is the denomination, biggest gold coin the Spanish made. The PVS across the center is...
Millions of similar gold coins vanished after the government banned private gold ownership in the 1930s, melted down or hidden away and forgotten for decades. This one survived in strong condition, earning a grade that placed its value around $4,000. Rick offered $3,000. And the seller accepted without hesitation, closing out a poker night nobody will forget anytime soon. Gold coins from this era carry a strange duality. Part of their worth comes from the metal itself, and part comes from the story stamped into the design. A rare case where art and currency collided to create something collectors still chase a century later. Number 4. DJ Ashba Gibson Les Paul Prototype. A guitar built for a children's hospital fundraiser turned into something nobody expected. The woman carrying it explained that her boyfriend was constructing a hospital in Las Vegas, and she'd been collecting donated items to help raise money for the cause. The guitar itself stood out instantly. A Gibson Les Paul with custom paint, switches, and controls, unlike anything found on a standard model. The kind of detail that immediately separates a custom build from anything off a factory line. She'd been told it once belonged to a member of a major rock band. Rick could see it came from Gibson's custom shop, but he needed proof of who actually played it. So he called in an expert, and the surprise walked through the door in person. The very musician connected to the guitar showed up, and recognized it immediately as the prototype used before his signature series went into full production. There was only one like it anywhere in the world, complete with visible wear from years on stage. The artist confirmed it could easily sell for $20,000 to $30,000 and insisted it shouldn't go for less. Rick saw a chance to do something bigger than a simple deal. He offered $20,000. Every cent going to the children's hospital.
I'll give you 20 grand. The kids at the hospital get the money, and I'll end up making a deal with him.
While arranging for the guitar to eventually return to the musician who once played it. Everyone walked away with something, and nobody walked away richer than the kids who needed it most. Prototype instruments like this one almost never reach the public. Most stay locked away in a manufacturer's archive, or end up destroyed once the final production version takes over, which is exactly what made this guitar a true one-of-one piece of music history. Number 3. Captain Cook Resolution and Adventure Medal. A small, unfamiliar medal sent Rick down a rabbit hole connected to one of history's most famous explorers. The seller had no idea what she was holding, only that it might be an old coin worth checking out. Two names caught Rick's attention immediately: engraved ships that once carried Captain James Cook across the Pacific during his second voyage of exploration in the 1770s, a journey that reshaped how Europeans understood the map of the world. These medals were never meant to be currency. Cook carried roughly 2,000 of them on his journey, handing them out as gifts to leaders he encountered across the Pacific Islands. If genuine, this would be one of the most detailed surviving examples from that era, almost too well preserved to believe. The seller admitted she'd be thrilled with $50 or $100 for it. An expert confirmed it as authentic, estimating its value between $7,500 and $8,500, a number that left her stunned into silence. She raised her asking price to match the high end, but Rick reminded her how far she'd already come from her original guess. After some negotiation, they settled on $5,000, 100 times more than she ever expected walking through the door. Diplomatic gifts like this one were handed out across thousands of miles of ocean, often to leaders meeting Europeans for the very first time. Most of those medals were lost, traded away, or buried alongside their original owners, making any surviving example a direct link to a moment of first contact between two very different worlds. Number 2. Benjamin Harrison signed cabinet card. A faded photograph mounted on stiff cardstock looked like nothing special at first glance. These cabinet cards were everywhere decades ago, produced by the millions, so the photo alone wasn't going to make anyone rich. What mattered was the name signed across the bottom: Benjamin Harrison, the 23rd President of the United States.
Benjamin Harrison, prior to becoming the 23rd President, the grandson of the 9th President, practiced law in Indianapolis.
The seller explained the photograph had stayed in her family for around 70 years, originally part of a larger photo album. She hoped for $500. Rick immediately questioned whether the signature was real or simply added to label the photo, a detail that would make a massive difference in value. If it wasn't authentic, the piece was worth barely $10. An expert stepped in to examine the ink closely, comparing it against verified samples of Harrison's handwriting. The signature held up under scrutiny, confirmed as genuine and written by hand rather than printed. Signed presidential photographs in this condition don't come around often, pushing its estimated value to around $1,250. Rick opened at $700. The two went back and forth a few times, and they finally landed on $750, more than the seller ever imagined, for a photo that had spent decades tucked inside a family album. Authenticating a signature this old comes down to tiny details most people never notice: the pressure of the pen, the slant of certain letters, the slight pauses where ink pools just a little thicker. Those small clues are often the only thing standing between a worthless print and a piece of real presidential history. Number 1. The mystery coin. No denomination, no familiar markings, nothing that made sense at first glance. The seller had carried the medal for years after picking it up at an estate sale, never quite figuring out what it was or where it came from. He suspected it might hold some value, hoping for around $1,000, but he had no real evidence to back that hope up, beyond a hunch he couldn't quite explain. Rick called in an expert to crack the mystery once and for all. One look was enough. The symbols traced back to a fraternal organization that thrived during the late 1800s, before fading into obscurity over the following century. These groups once covered the country, producing all kinds of collectible memorabilia that's become increasingly desirable as the organizations themselves disappeared from memory. This particular piece stood out for its condition, every detail still sharp despite its age. The expert placed its value at around $1,500, more than the seller expected.
But there's a good amount of wear. It circulated, and I think this is worth in the neighborhood of $1,500.
But nowhere near life-changing. Rick opened with $1,000. The seller asked for $1,200, and they met in the middle at $1,100. It wasn't the biggest deal of the day, but it proved that even the strangest, most unidentifiable items can carry real value if someone takes the time to look closer. Mystery items like this one are often the most rewarding part of the job for any appraiser. There's no shortcut, no catalog to flip through, just years of pattern recognition built from handling thousands of pieces before this one ever crossed the counter. 12 sellers walked through that door, expecting almost nothing, and 12 of them walked out with stories worth telling for years. A helmet buried for centuries, a coin nobody knew existed, a guitar tied to rock history. Every single item carried a surprise nobody saw coming. That's the real magic of this shop. Value hides in places people never think to look, tucked inside old boxes, family albums, and forgotten estate sales. Which of these moments caught you off guard the most? And if you had to walk away with just one item from this list, which one would you choose? Drop your answer in the comments below. We genuinely want to know. If this video kept you hooked, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories like this one. Stay close, because the next discovery might be even bigger than the last.